start, and this is Critterature.
And I'm Philomena a doctor of stories.
And I am a bug brain scientist. And today we're going to talk about A Bug's Life, that iconic film.
Yeah, emphasis on iconic.
Did you grow up watching this? I did. It has a special place in my memory.
Okay, I don't know if this is true, but I think I remember... My main association with this movie is I think I remember being at a theme park, like Universal Studios or something.
Jealous.
That had like a Bug's Life not exhibit, whatever, like play place kind of. And I remember like in my child brain that it seemed enormous.
That would have blown my mind to go there.
Yeah.
And just were you surrounded by bugs and like people in bug costumes?
No, it was like a playground kind of. So I just felt like I was like going down leaf slides and stuff. But I remember it seeming like an entire world, and I remember being lost and a little bit scared.
Yeah, well, the whole point of that is to make you feel teeny tiny, right?
I like already felt teeny tiny. I was a child.
Well, imagine if you were 1,000 times smaller.
Oh, God. I was right to be scared.
Yeah.
But we're not here to talk about the theme park.
No, we're here to talk about A Bug's Life, which is a film that is, I think, pretty fun. Maybe I just have nostalgia for it.
I do not have nostalgia for it, and I'll be honest, I enjoyed it a lot more than I expected to.
What were you expecting?
I thought it would be kind of like everything I don't like about Pixar, and I think it ended up being everything I do like about Pixar.
What is it? What are the things you don't like about Pixar?
I guess somewhere in my head, I had Pixar movies compared to like animated Disney films as like kind of shallow, kind of like appealing to the lowest common denominator, but there was a lot going on in this movie. I liked it. Like, spoiler alert, my takeaway from this movie is that it was basically Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations meets The Seven Samurai. And yes, I do plan to defend that take.
Good. I'm excited to hear all the details. Do we want to get into it?
Let's get into it.
All right. So we're going to go through some of the basic story and interject with thoughts. We open on Ant Island, which is an isolated little island. Is it in a lake or in a river? Something. It's in a small body of water.
Yeah. It's small enough that that we don't have to worry about humans.
No, it seems like there's basically nothing there except ants and plants. And the ants have the run-of-the-mill. They are collecting food. They are very, very organized in how they go about it. All the workers go out and they have a very traditional harvesting practice to pick up seeds and then, in a very much organized way, transport them back to the nest along foraging trails. And they're doing so to collect food both for the winter and, we hear, also as tribute to pay off the extortion fee of the grasshopper gang.
And that's pretty much the plot, right? Is that there's this extortion racket that the ants are caught up in, and it seems like it kind of plays itself off as being a mob movie in that sense, but it's kind of just capitalism at work. It's like capitalism, but like with overtones of the mob.
Yeah. Well, it's an entire society that's being extorted. Right?
Right.
It's an entire kingdom, essentially. They're a nation. They have a queen. This is an ant colony, but it's organized along the rules of monarchy.
Right.
They have a queen and a princess, and then a smaller princess, a royal family.
Would we say that they're a vassal state of the grasshoppers, then? Because they kind of like have their own internal hierarchy, but they're paying tribute to the grasshoppers.
I don't know if the grasshoppers are a state. They're more just like a bunch of warlords.
Well, listen.
But they seem to be migratory. They just kind of go from place to place, beating people up for food.
Yeah, and, that sounds like the state to me a lot of times.
Yeah, I just don't know if they're organized in the structure of the state. But they are analogous. There's certainly tones of imperialism.
Yeah. Okay, I want to rewind though, because this body of this landmass that they're on is called Ant Island. Do you think that the grasshoppers call it Grasshopper Island? Or do you think everyone calls it Ant Island?
I don't think that they do, because I don't think the grasshoppers consider themselves to live there. I think they just show up there and eat the food and then leave. I mean, I guess we don't really see what happens during the winter.
That's true.
Because maybe they hang out there, but it's sort of hard to imagine.
So there's more of like a Hun situation, maybe.
Yeah, maybe these are more. Yeah, think of them as the steppe people
Yeah.
that come
okay.
and raid the sedentaries.
Yes. Okay. This is it. This finally we have found it. Okay, great.
But they do seem just like gangsters.
Right. Okay, but so
Like
this
there's
is
like two brothers who are kind of the head, or there's the one head and then his doofy brother who is an underling within the gang, the grasshopper gang.
all right. Right. So this is a situation, but we open with some of the characters.
Yes, our main character is Flick, who is a worker ant, and he is a little different from the rest because most of the ants really like to do things the same way. They're very traditionalist and they like to be orderly and follow the rules, but Flick is an inventor and he's bumbling. He doesn't fit within the lines very well. He's a lot of inventions that will possibly lead to greater efficiency, but he's not very good at implementing them and he kind of gets in the way.
Yeah. What do you think of Flick?
He's kind of endearing,
Yeah.
but I don't know. The fact that we have to have a male worker ant as our main character is very silly, but I guess it's the 90s and that was required for a children's movie for the main character to be a boy.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. I mean, he has a pretty good in Princess Ada. He has a pretty good counterpart. Princess Ada, played by Julia Louis-Dreyfus. The casting in this movie is actually stellar throughout. Julia
Mm-hmm.
Louis-Dreyfus is kind of a weird choice for this. It seems weird to me that these apparently adolescent or like late adolescent characters are played by like grown ass adults because they don't sound like whatever their human age analog is supposed to be. They
That's
sound like adults.
Yeah. I mean, they sound fine. They sound
They
good.
sound fine. Yeah, but it's just I don't know. I wonder if it would have changed the vibe. But the voices are all fantastic. I like to imagine the ant doing the Elaine dance.
Yes, I like Princess Ada. Ada, by the way, is the genus name for a group of leafcutter ants, which these ants are not. They are, I don't know, they're some kind of harvester ant or something.
There's kind of a tension. In some ways, the main tension of the early film is between Flick and the society of which he's a part. You know, he's a male worker ant, but he's not really a worker in the traditional sense. And this to me is where this movie feels so 1998, which is when it was produced, is that I feel like he's kind of like he's halfway between like a Leonardo da Vinci figure and like a Steve Jobs figure. Like he's just trying to disrupt everything. Get Flick to Silicon Valley, that's where he belongs.
Yeah, I also wrote down that he's a disruptor.
Yes, right, exactly. So it's like, because like the first scenes that we get of the anthill are like these kind of lines of ants, like assembly line style, classic sort of division of labor, right? And within that, then we have Flick sort of saying, like, here's like an overly complicated, better way that we can do this thing. And it never quite lands, and he ends up screwing everything up, which ends up becoming a big plot point. But in like a bunch of smaller ways, he's just making these little inventions that everyone's like, this doesn't help us. We don't need this. But he keeps insisting on sort of trying to push it on anybody.
Yeah, you're right. It's somewhere between, yeah, Steve Jobs and Leonardo da Vinci. I think we do see that his inventions work.
Yeah.
They are functional and they could be useful. They're just very complicated
Yeah.
and they require society to adapt to actually use them efficiently, which society does not want to do.
Right. It's like, so for one example of these inventions is that he creates a telescope out of a drop of water and a rolled up leaf, which is objectively very freaking cool, but ants don't need to look at things from far away, so it's kind of useless, right? And I feel like the narrative here is like in contrast to the ants who are these like earnest proletarians, sort of within the power hierarchy, just doing their work. Flick is the inventor who kind of represents that like spirit of capitalism in a way. And I feel like the movie is sort of celebrating him as this sort of visionary in a society that is not quite ready for him yet.
Yeah, and he's very selfless.
Mm-hmm.
Like the way he's depicted is extremely kind to him.
Yeah.
He doesn't seem to have any ulterior motives for his inventions. He just wants to help out and make things work better.
Yeah.
Which is a little different from real life capitalists.
Yes, that's true.
But so anyway, what happens is that Flick, in trying to be helpful, accidentally knocks over their entire food supply because they had made the unfortunate decision to place it right next to a cliff, so in the night one can knock it over and spill every seed they've collected into the water. And that means that the colony not only has no food for the winter, but has nothing to pay the grasshopper extorters when they arrive the next day.
Not really Flick's fault. Okay, it is sort of Flick's fault, but they're the ones who put it next to the water. I just want to say I felt for Flick here.
Yeah, they made a bad decision, but I think the idea here is that society is organized around people just doing their job in a very particular way and don't move outside the lines at all. And the fact is that Flick can't stay within the lines. And and he literally just is clumsy. And that's what leads to the downfall.
He just has this big ant brain and no one is quite ready to deal with him.
Yeah. So the grasshoppers show up. They are very upset because the food that they wanted isn't here, and so they threaten the colony and they say, if you don't collect double the amount of food that we normally require, we're gonna kill the queen.
So the grasshoppers, what did you think of the grasshoppers as characters?
I like their design. I really like the character designs in this movie. I think that they are very buggy, and the grasshoppers have a lot of good body segments and textures, but they work for the characters. Like, they're kind of scary, a lot of these grasshoppers. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I thought, agree with all of that. I think the way that they walk is very sort of predatory and fun, but the casting here really sticks out to me. So we kind of have, these two brothers. The main head honcho grasshopper is played by Kevin Spacey, which is a casting that has either not aged very well or has aged extremely well, depending on how convincing a villain you want him to be.
Yeah.
So kind of, especially the parts where he's just sort of more physically menacing, I'm just sort of like, ooh boy, that freaks me out a little bit. But then his idiot brother, whose name is Molt, who is the second in command, is played by Richard Kind, and that is a perfect casting. Absolutely A+, 100%. Molt is a funny name. Do grasshoppers molt?
Yeah, they do. Pretty much all insects molt.
Well, that's part of because
insects have these hard exoskeletons that are inflexible. They can't grow bigger. So all insects, in order to get larger, have to shed their skin, get soft for a while, get bigger, and then basically develop a new exoskeleton.
So what you're telling me is snakes are insects?
No, molting is just common across lots of types of animals. One thing I'll say about the character designs, actually two things. One is that it's very arbitrary which character designs have 4 legs and which have 6 legs. The ants all have 4 limbs, whereas the grasshoppers have 6, and so do some of the other insects. Am I wrong?
No, that sounds right.
And I guess that's just them deciding to anthropomorphize the ants a little bit more, but it's silly. Another thing is that the ants, there are little child ants who are just small adult workers. And lest we forget, ants are holometabolous insects that go through a complete metamorphosis, meaning they are born as larvae that grow to go into a pupa, and then only when they shed the pupa skin do they reach their final adult form where they no longer molt anymore. So we've got something weird going on with these ants' life cycle.
Interesting.
They seem to have been turned into a hemimetabolous insect that only gets bigger through molting but has its full adult body shape even from the start, which is actually how grasshoppers are. They are hemimetabolous, but ants are not.
Right, okay. So basically they just made them more human-like in some ways.
They didn't want to make larvae for some reason, because those are less relatable, I guess. Although we do see a fly grub at some point.
I mean, I was a larva.
Yeah, some of us were larvae.
I looked a little bit like a larva. I looked more like Jabba the Hutt, but that's kind of what I think a human larva would look like.
So Flick gets found out, and he is accused of lying about his being responsible for losing the food,
Mhm.
and as a result, he is basically banished. He has an idea. His idea is, I'll go collect some big bugs, we'll fight off the grasshoppers. Basically, we'll get some mercenaries. And the rest of the ants are like, that's not going to work. No one can fight off these grasshoppers. They're invincible. So, Flick, you can just go off and die.
Okay, so this for me is where the movie literally becomes a remake of the Seven Samurai.
Which I have not seen.
Okay, so the brief plot of the seven, at least the situation of the Seven Samurai, is that there's a village that is like a rice producing village that is being menaced by bandits, and in order to defend themselves, they send someone out to hire a bunch of samurai to defend the village. But they don't have any money. All they have to pay with is food, so they're like, find hungry samurai.
The best kind of samurai.
Yeah. So the samurai come back and they end up sort of training the village, and that ends up being the plot. And that is like literally the plot of this movie, but add in sort of this weird hero's journey element to it.
Yeah.
Where Flick is going out and sort of reconciling his tension with his own community.
That totally fits.
But it becomes a parody when we meet who the Seven Samurai are in this case.
They're not exactly up to snuff.
Not exactly.
That's really good to know, though. So Flick leaves, and he goes off to Bug City, which is just a bunch of garbage underneath a trailer that's been infested with all kinds of different bug species. This is a fun little scene.
Yeah.
There's so many different bugs here, and there are all kinds of fun bug jokes. And you see mosquitoes hanging out at a bar drinking blood. They got different types of blood types on offer. You've got some flies eating shit because that's funny. And all kinds of other bugs doing bug stuff.
So I don't know if this would be like a critique of Pixar or just a description of what they do, but I was reading an article on Screen Rant by Raylene Silva that basically said that the Pixar archetype of movies is what if X had feelings, which I think is spot on, right? But in this case, I think it's something closer to like, what if bugs were each a different type of dude? Right. But on that theory, what kind of dude would you say ants are in this movie? Like, not Flick, but like the average ant.
Dutiful drone office worker.
Absolutely.
Or serf.
Yeah, I said earnest proletarian. I think we're on the same page.
Yeah.
What kind of dude would you say Grasshopper is?
Grasshopper is a mobster, as we've established.
Absolutely. I kind of like mobster, but like in the motif of the biker gang mobster, kind of.
They are totally biker. Like when they go and fly, I think the sound that they use for it is based on a motorcycle sound.
And like when they're back at their hangout, it's kind of like a pool hall, it's like a bar. Flies, I said, are dicks, basically.
Yeah.
Beetles, big and dumb.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this is like we only really see one
That's
of
true.
them.
That's true.
Some of this is generalizations.
Yeah,
but
okay.
Yes, you take a bug and then you turn it into a stereotype.
Yeah.
And that's how you write your story.
Wasps are like tough guy martial artists, kind of, or something. Or just like wasps will mess you up. That's what a wasp is.
Yeah, we have our flea, who is a carny. We have a praying mantis, who's like
like an aged British Orientalist,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. He's like a fake psychic.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
We have a femme fatale spider.
Black Widow,
right?
who's literally a Black Widow. She has 12 late husbands.
Yeah. Wait, is she? No, actually, she's just kind of nice.
Yeah, but she also
the sexy one is the moth, right?
Yes.
I mixed them up for a second.
Yeah, but the Black Widow is like nice, but for some reason has this string of dead husbands. So you're kind of like, what's going on here exactly? Yeah. Okay, but these are sort of the characters who we see, but like
they're part of a failing circus, and the only way that the circus makes money is when the flea, who is the ringleader, gets brutally maimed, and the audience finds that pretty entertaining. But anyway, Flick meets them at a bar and convinces them to come back to fight off the grasshoppers. The bugs think that they're just being brought in to give a show. They don't think that you're going to have to do any actual fight.
Yeah, and this is where the Seven Samurai motif becomes kind of a parody of it, is that there's just this massive miscommunication that makes everyone sort of think, so circus performers think that they're being hired to do circus performance. Flick thinks he's hiring hardcore warriors to do hardcore warrior stuff. The audience knows both sides of this misunderstanding, and it becomes kind of a farce, but a very pleasant one.
Yeah, so they get recruited, and on their way back, they find one of the little young royal ants who's being threatened by a bird. Because birds are the most monstrous beast in this world is a bird, because they will just gobble up bugs. So the bugs manage to help rescue the younger ant queen Dot. And this gives them a reputation as being actual warriors who can fight off a bird. So they're kind of get into the good graces of ant society when they arrive.
Yeah, and it sort of perpetuates this farce. It makes the misunderstanding, of course, has to get worse before it gets better. And now it's not just Flick's misunderstanding, it's the entire ant colony sort of like buys into this misunderstanding in some way.
Yeah, and as part of the celebration, these little children, school children, give a performance where they depict the coming battle.
Yeah.
And they create these paintings of brutally murdered bugs being split in half, the battle. And this is where the bug troupe first realizes what they're actually in for.
Yeah.
They're not here for jokes.
This is one of the most surprising and charming parts of the movie.
I really like this scene.
It was like a middle school theater adaptation of the Iliad. It's like people's pates being split and brain pans being displayed. It's a lot. It's very bloody.
So they come up with a scheme where they're not going to have to actually fight. They're going to construct a large fake bird that is going to come in and scare away the grasshoppers. So they get working on this, and they get a lot of ants working on the project.
Yeah, and this is sort of where Flick has a chance to redeem himself. Flick at this point he has sort of bought himself a little bit of credibility by bringing back these supposedly fearsome warriors, and people are now willing to take his ideas a little bit more seriously. And with that, he's able to construct this simulation of a bird, and people are actually willing to get into it and are actually like kind of noticing what his ideas for the first time and being like, oh damn, like you just made a bird ornithopter. Like you're actually kind of cool, Flick. And it seems like maybe there's like a little bit more sparks flying between him and Princess Ada, because of course there's like a low-key
There's gotta be a
plot.
romance.
Yes.
Between our proletarian hero and the queen.
Yeah.
Or the queen in waiting.
Yes.
Also, this ornithopter, which is kind of like an airplane held by a string, is piloted by the Girl Scout troop.
Love it.
Which is adorable and also very questionable, because it's a pretty dangerous job.
Where are their parents? Who let this happen?
Yeah, I mean, their parents are the queen,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
who is everyone's mom, one would think. Although, very unclear how that is working in this particular ant colony, given that we have some romance between Flick and Princess Ada, who should be siblings, since everyone's siblings in an ant colony.
It's just so hard for women to have it all. Like, how do you have kids and a career? Like, sometimes you just end up letting your kids pilot an aerial weapon to fight off a bird and save your entire community, because you're a busy woman. You have to be at work.
Yeah, you have to be at work, and your kids are just getting into incest, apparently.
What?
This is what I just said. This is how ant colonies work, is that the queen is the mother of all individuals in the colony. So if there's romance happening within the colony, it's happening between relatives.
Wow. Okay, so our read is that ant incest happens because the queen is a working mother.
That is the only way I can put together mine and your different thoughts. I'm not sure what to make of it. I think in the canon of the story, they have ignored the whole eusociality thing where there's this reproductive division of labor. It seems to be more like the queen is a political leader rather than a literal mother in the story. But that is how it is in real ant colonies.
Yeah, because it's only worker ants here, right? Like are there any like warrior ants or anything?
No, so soldier ants are not found in all species,
Uh-huh.
and they are really just a subtype of worker.
Okay.
So they have workers, but then they have Princess Ada as clearly a young queen.
Mm-hmm.
So in a real ant colony, young queens have to disperse, right?
Oh.
They don't inherit the colony from the old queen. They go and found a new colony. That's how ant colonies typically reproduce.
Wow.
So she would go leave the colony, mate with a male from a different colony, and then found her own nest.
Got
If
it.
she's staying in the colony and mating with one of her own males, then that is going to be an inbred colony.
Something has gone seriously wrong. Okay, I see. So the ant colony structure has been turned into a traditional hereditary monarchy because it works better for the plot.
Yeah. So we can talk more about ant social organization now or later. You want to get through the rest of the plot first?
Yeah, let's go back to the plot.
Okay. So they finish making the bird, and eventually the flea, Carney, comes back. And he blows their cover. He reveals that they're not fighters, they're just buffoons. And everyone in the ant colony is horrified by this. They think they have thrown in their hopes, and they've been spending all this labor building this contraption of a fake bird instead of collecting food. And as a result, they have put themselves in an even worse situation than they were to begin with. And so now they actually just banish Flick and the bugs. And Hopper returns. He is very upset and disappointed and decides to take over the colony. And we hear that he is actually now planning to murder the queen and just eat all the food. And as a result, the colony will die because they will not have food for the winter. So the bugs find out about this through Dot, the young baby queen, and they decide to come back and have a last-ditch effort to fight off the grasshoppers. So they deploy the bird. And at first, it kind of works, and the grasshoppers are scared, but eventually this fake bird gets caught on fire in a horrifying scene where all the little Girl Scouts who are, again, in charge of piloting this fake bird are in danger of burning to death.
Reason number 8,000 why you do not let Girl Scouts fly fighter jets. It's not a good idea. Like, just let them graduate from the Girl Scouts first, and then they can go to fight school.
Let them graduate first, yes. So the bird thing doesn't work out because it turns out to be fake, and Hopper, the grasshopper, beats up Flick and proclaims his superiority and the innate inferiority of ants as a species who are lowly life forms who live only to serve the grasshoppers. And this is where we hear that Flick points out that Hopper actually fears the overwhelming numbers of the ants, and he's really just trying to denigrate and psychologically control this colony because in reality he cannot control them by force.
This is where I was thinking of a couple of things. One, the fact that the mob movie motif just is revealed to be capitalism working as it normally works. And it also made me think of this part in Rousseau's Discourse on Inequality, where he's sort of like, the worst thing that ever happened to humankind was when someone gathered a lot of property to themselves and convinced everyone else who were stronger and were more numerous that it was in their best interest to protect the person who had all the property. And that's how society was formed. And so that's what I was sort of thinking of in this moment, was this was just sort of like, oh yeah, they can't realize that they're a lot stronger than us, because then those earnest proletarians are going to become an activated proletariat.
Yeah, we can't allow them to obtain class consciousness.
Nope.
Because then the revolution will come.
It sure will.
And it does, actually, in this story. The ants start to fight as a collective, and they beat up Hopper and shoot him out of a cannon. I think that he gets eaten by a bird eventually, and the ants drive off the rest of the grasshoppers. And peace is restored. There's no more grasshopper threat because the grasshoppers have no leader. And now the ants they've recognized their own power and they're ready to defend the nest on their own. At this point, the denouement, it's very nice and pleasant. Flick and Ada are getting closer. Maybe they're actually dating now, which is showing that our special boy gets to marry into royalty. How nice.
He's just such a big-brained disruptor that he is able to become part of the ruling class.
Yeah.
The hereditary monarchy is now a technocracy.
That's meritocracy for you. But crucially, the overall power structure of society is actually not disrupted.
Nope.
Because the oppressors in this case were just an external threat. There were no actual problems in ant society itself. The only problems were those outsiders who came in and demanded our food. Once we drive them away, all good.
Yeah, no, I mean, Flick has essentially repelled the invaders in order to assume power himself, and in order to continue the relentless working of things that is ant hereditary monarchy society.
Yeah, and we see that this technocracy is starting to adopt some of his inventions.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we're really moving forward in society. We're industrializing, and that's going to be great for everyone.
And is that the end of the movie?
I think the queen actually abdicates and makes Ada the new queen, and I guess that kind of makes Flick the king? I don't think they say that, but it's suggested.
I think it would have been more realistic in political terms if they had to kill and eat her. It would have made it a very different film, though.
Yeah.
PG-13 at least.
Yeah, the thing is, in real ant colonies, there is no abdication. The queens typically live until they die, and then the colony usually dies with them.
We're not going to get a Pope Benedict situation. Also,
to add another complicating factor, male ants, when they mate once and then they die. Because that is... They put their all into that one mating. That's pretty much how it goes.
Are we sure that they don't just fake their deaths so they don't have to call people back?
I'm pretty sure that they do actually die. But it's an interesting theory you propose.
I would prefer that to guys just not calling me back.
Yeah. Well, maybe you should date some ants.
Okay.
So the other thing about ant mating practices is that they really just do it once. The females as well. So they might mate a few times in their mating flight, but they collect and store all the sperm that they are gonna need for their many thousands of daughters for the rest of their life. And they hold them in a special organ called a spermatheca, and then they use those sperm to fertilize their eggs throughout the rest of their lifetime.
Okay, so the sperma part of that word is obvious, but what's theca?
I think it means something like holder or bag.
Sperm sac.
Yeah, because I need to look up the etymology of this one, but it reminds me of a different word that's called an ootheca, which is an
egg sac.
Egg sac.
Makes sense. Taylor, we have forgotten to cover probably the most important part of this movie.
What's that?
The gay stuff.
Yeah, let's get into it. We got the plot, so now we can talk about whatever we want.
All right.
You're talking about the ladybug?
I'm talking about the ladybug and the stick insect. Stick insect is easier. Stick insect is the other absolutely inspired casting, which is David Hyde Pierce as a slim, effete diva stick insect, which if you don't know who David Hyde Pierce is, if you don't know what he looks like, if you haven't seen Niles from Frasier, David Hyde Pierce is exactly the perfect person to play the stick insect.
I see. I didn't realize that. That's great.
It's the perfect casting. But he's just sort of an opera gay, like that's his vibe. The real gay stuff here is the ladybug. Francis.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on here. It seems like some of it just has to do with the fact that he's a ladybug who are inherently feminine as viewed by all other bugs.
Yeah.
Because they keep misgendering him as a woman.
Yes.
And in terms of the character design, what this really means is that he has a little bit of blush on his cheeks and he has eyelashes, which indicate woman.
But his manner is as butch as it comes, kind of like working class, like Brooklyn,
Yeah, and he's very grumpy about being misgendered.
Yeah.
Which is kind of understandable.
I think Francis is transmasc. I think that's what's going on here. But like not
allegorically, sure.
But not living in a moment where transition is possible, and so just pissed off all the time at everybody justifiably.
Yeah, there is weird little scene where he becomes adopted as the head of the Girl Scout troop and finds his motherly instincts, as that was described in the film, which is, it's kind of nice, I guess. Like,
Yeah.
he sort of comes to terms with having a somewhat of a feminine side, at least feeling protective of these little girls. It is a little weird. He seems coerced into it.
It's a complicated world, is bug gender.
Yeah.
So yeah, Francis, I don't think the androgynous name or the name that can be sort of like read in either way is, I think, no coincidence.
Definitely. Any other bug design choices that you want to note?
This isn't so much a bug design choice, but one of the things I really loved about the movie and the way that I think it brings in another classic narrative motif of the country and the city is the way that the environment designs shift from the parts where they're at the ant colony to when they're at the city or in the city or what passes for the city, which is that when they're at the ant colony, everything is made out of some little bit of nature, a rolled up leaf, sticks, stones, whatever, a drop of water. When they're in the city, everything becomes kind of Marcel the Shell. It's like everything is made out of a bottle cap or made out of some piece of trash or something like that. Both of which, both of these make sense as kinds of environments that bugs actually inhabit. But the result is that the two environments feel very different, but still kind of having that same really pleasing logic of something that is small turned into a facsimile of something that is big.
Yeah, and maybe thematically, this sort of plays into the idea that the ants are kind of traditionalist, almost maybe proletarian, but maybe serf. Maybe
like
more
agrarian,
like peasants,
for sure.
Whereas the city bugs are cosmopolitan and
degenerates.
They're degenerates. They're into circuses, the worst form of entertainment.
Of course. Yeah, so and it's, there is that sense of like he's entering this very seedy area when he goes into the city, which is pretty funny.
Yeah, it does align with the fact that there are a lot of insects that do well in disturbed environments or human influenced environments, and that's what we see there.
Absolutely.
Some other bug notes. The queen ant has a little pet aphid, which is adorable. This aphid seems to be about as intelligent as a dog, which is interesting because the ants are so much smarter than them, I guess. Unclear how intelligence works across different insect species in this world. But it is nice because real life ants, many species do actually farm aphids. In this case, they protect the aphids and give them a nice place to live and keep them clean. And in return, the aphids will suck sap from plants, which is something ants can't do, and then produce sugar droplets, which the ants can feed on. It's called honeydew. And sometimes the ants will eat the aphids also. So they're a bit like a farmed animal class. Like, cows produce both milk and meat for us.
That was a nice little Easter egg for bug girls in the movie. I feel like there are a lot of those little things.
There are, yeah. They did give some of the royal female ants wings, which is correct. Royal ants have wings, really. Royal male and female ants have wings. It's just the workers that don't have them. One thing that they messed up is that Queen here should not still have her wings, because those wings are used only during the mating flight of ants, when they're in that dispersal phase of their life. So what happens after that mating flight is done is that the males die, so they're not present in the colony any longer. And the new queen females dig a hole in the ground and found a new nest, and they lose their wings at this point because wings will get in the way when you're living in a hole in the ground. So shouldn't have her wings anymore. I like that the grasshoppers evoke locusts. They are extremely hungry and greedy, and they're also migratory. They travel to Mexico and then back. I think this film was probably set in California. At least it looked like California to me. So they seem like locusts. They also make a couple of little notes where at some point the grasshopper Hopper is trying to figure out who's who in the ant colony, and he touches one of the ants with his antennae and is like, "You don't smell like the queen," which is a nice little touch, I thought, because so many insects use smell for communication. And usually this is in the form of producing pheromones for intra-colony or intra-species communication. But queen ants do actually produce queen pheromones, which chemically mark them as the queen. So that's legit.
Damn.
I like a lot of the designs are really, really nice. They have cute little segmented feet or tarsi. The flies have little maggot babies. There are these clown bugs that are based on pill bugs or isopods, and they don't speak English. They seem to, I don't know if they're speaking gibberish or some kind of real language that's just sped up really fast. I couldn't really tell. But for me, this reminded me of the fact that pill bugs are not actually insects. They're actually crustaceans. They're just a type of land-dwelling crustacean. So
what? I didn't
sort
know
of
that.
the fact that they're quite foreign sort of maybe connects to that.
That's another bug Easter egg.
One last bug Easter egg is that Heimlich the butterfly,
whose characterization is just hungry and German.
Hungry German caterpillar. Yeah, he eventually goes through metamorphosis, comes out of his chrysalis, and is revealed to be exactly the same but with some teeny tiny wings growing on top.
That was a lovely reversed expectation.
Yeah, it was a funny joke, but this is suggesting that Heimlich is sort of a neotenous insect who's retaining many of the larval body characteristics even as an adult.
What does neotenous mean?
It means retaining the youthful characteristics. Neoteny is that concept.
Oh.
This is something you see in a lot of animals. You see it in domesticated animals, like domesticated dogs compared to wolves. A lot of their features are more similar to puppies. Like they have bigger ears and.
I consider myself neotenous.
Yeah.
Yeah. In spirit, neotenous in spirit.
Youthful.
Yeah.
Like we like to be youthful. I don't know if we want to be too childlike.
Okay, that would be immaturity. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so I think we agree that this is a charming movie. It's doing a lot of cool things in terms of bugs, but I want to make the case, one, that this is a movie that is fundamentally about labor.
Tell us. Give us. Lay it out.
And two, that it is actually kind of a really interesting historical document when we think of it in relation to two of its source materials. Okay, so the two source materials that I'm talking about are Aesop's fable of the ant and the grasshopper, and then Disney's earlier film from 1934, The Grasshopper and the Ants. So Aesop's fable, briefly, is a grasshopper with a fiddle comes up to a bunch of ants and asks for food. And the ants say, "Bitch, why haven't you been storing food for the winter?" And the grasshopper says, "I was just playing my fiddle. I was playing music." To which the ants say, "Making music, were you? Very well. Now dance." And turn their backs on him, presumably to let him starve to death. And the moral of the fable is there's a time for work and a time for play. Brutal stuff. The message is kind of that art is fine for leisure, but the only really virtuous thing that earned you a right to exist in society is work.
Yeah. Crushing.
So the Disney version of this from 1934, and the date there is very important, is called The Grasshopper and the Ants. It's an update of the Aesop fable for the Depression era, and with it is updated the moral to become very timely indeed for the Depression era. The grasshopper is a similar figure who has his fiddle and seduces a wayward worker into the way of dance, drawing it away from the sort of ant division of labor, while playing a fiddle and singing, "The world owes us a living." The queen sees this and gets pissed off and sort of chases him away. Winter comes, the grasshopper starts to starve and freeze, tightening his belt over and over again and turning blue. And he sees the anthill in the distance and just manages to make it there and pound on the door before collapsing. The ants revive him and feed him soup and put his feet in warm water. And the queen comes, apparently to scold him, and says, "With ants, only those who work can stay, so take your fiddle and play." The song the grasshopper sings, instead of the earlier song, "The world owes us a living," is now, "We owe the world a living." An inversion of the first moral, literally singing for one's supper. And so instead of the fable, we have this happy ending where the artist is now included in the social division of labor of society and artistic labor is valued, but on the condition that it has to be a social good that's supplied for all. And so the reason why I think the date is so important is because 1 year later, the Works Progress Administration's federal arts program would be funded by the New Deal.
Wow.
Which would basically create ways for people to do artistic work for a public good as a way of making a living. That program ran till 1943. It was till it was when it was subsumed by the war effort. But in the meantime, it funded people like Zora Neale Hurston doing her folklore work, and Jackson Pollock, the painter. So it was a pretty wild program. But like, that's pretty much what this grasshopper and the ant thing is proposing. So my question for you, Taylor, is if the moral of the original fable is there's a time for work and a time for play, and the moral of the Disney film is we owe the world a living, we kind of have to work to earn our keep in society. What do you think the moral of this film is? Does it have a moral?
I think that there is a moral in around removing the parasites from society.
Wow.
I think that is part of it, right? There's this toll on a effective society that seems to be an external force that we need to fight off. That's one thing, sort of a different moral.
Okay, so removing the parasites from society, as in like
the grasshoppers,
the ruling class.
The second point is that the society doesn't know what to do with the disruptor.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
Initially, this causes problems because his type of work doesn't fit in with what society wants and how society is organized. So eventually society has to incorporate him into his own role. Society has to make space for someone who's a little different, who has a different type of labor.
Yeah, and in some ways, I think I completely agree with both of those. And what's interesting with this update of it is that the artist or the musician instead becomes, we have performers.
The Silicon Valley boy.
Yeah, but it becomes the inventor figure.
Yeah.
Right? And so it becomes this kind of like, this sense of, I don't know, like the liberatory power of technology. If we just like let these disruptors do their thing, then it seems like then maybe we don't have to have this exploitative class structure, but at the end, as we discussed, this inventor figure just becomes part of the old class structure in a certain way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really funny. It's so 90s.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love your take on it. I have another point, which is that in real ant colonies, there is a threat of a social parasite. Because ant colonies involve a lot of collected resources. They involve a lot of altruistic behavior because you have all these individuals that are doing labor that's either collecting food or caring for the young, but they're not reproducing on their own. So their only evolutionary fitness comes from the success of the colony as a whole, with the success of the queen's reproductive output. And so you have this potential for parasites to either come in from outside, which can happen because there are species that will invade ant colonies and try to live inside of them and live off their resources. Sometimes they will actually come in and kill the queen. Sometimes they'll just live there. So ant societies have to, and all social insect societies have to evolve ways to prevent that from disrupting the stability of the society. So there is kind of like a threat from the outside that's possible. The other thing that can happen is that you can have disruption from the inside. And the way that this can happen in real ant colonies is, as I've said, worker ants are sterile females. They do not reproduce, but sometimes they can. Sometimes they can lay eggs. Usually these are unfertilized eggs that wouldn't be able to grow into a new female because of the haplodiploid sex determination thing that ants do. But basically, a worker ant can potentially lay an unfertilized egg that would grow into a new male who could then go out and potentially mate with a new queen and found a new nest. But anyway, if a worker is producing offspring, then she is sort of pushing back against the kind of the structure of the society. So often you will see that reproductive worker ants will be targets of aggression inside of ant colonies.
Wow.
This is called policing behavior, and it's a thing. So
all cops are bastards includes ants. I've said it before. I'll say it again.
This is our harsh take. Ant societies not better than human ones.
Oh my god.
I think I'll just end by saying that it's interesting how ant societies can serve so many different roles in media.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes they're communists, sometimes they are fascists. In this case, they're like old-fashioned,
yeah,
almost like a feudal society. and they have a monarchy that is inefficient but
Mm-hmm.
basically just.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's interesting how you can use this kind of collectivist insect to fill in all these different kinds of allegorical roles.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does feel like, to the extent that they are sort of playing on the ants as communists trope, it seems like it's a little bit approvingly, in terms of like the ants sort of gaining class consciousness and realizing they can throw off their oppressor. But it's also the sense that, like, they are all working together towards their collective sustenance. And it seems like that kind of includes the monarchical rule as well, because they're living under these conditions of extreme scarcity where they do have to all pull together. There are elements of some kind of communal existence, but there's also that sort of rigid class structure.
Yeah, I think that the way they're depicted here is that most of these worker ants need a leader,
Yeah.
right? Because most of them, they can't get by without being told what to do. Flick is the only one who can really think for himself. The rest of them need a queen.
Yeah.
And the queen, her job is to be decisive and to make decisions. That's not what queen ants actually do. Remember, queen ants actually just lay eggs. They don't tell anyone what to do.
Mm-hmm.
But in this story, they are, I think, an inefficient but basically necessary form of social organization. And yeah, it's a bit weird. I agree. They're playing on a little bit of communist tropes here, but they don't really go for it.
Yeah, it seems like it's more of a nod to the history of that depiction of ants, or that use of ants in political terms. Like, they kind of play with it every once in a while, but they're not really committing to it in the way that, like, Starship Troopers was.
Yeah. Should we go to our bugs rating scale?
Yes.
All right. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, believability. I don't really know what I was basing this off of, but I gave it a 1. I mean, I felt like the bugs were all, like, really fun, and there were, like, little bits and pieces, like some of those Easter eggs that I thought were really cool, but I didn't really feel like, in bug terms, there was that much that was, like, that interesting or deep going on with it. And in political terms, I sort of felt like I was sort of annoyed by the technocratic angle of it, and I was just like, don't feed me this sort of myth again, the meritocracy myth, like, or the, like, listen to the person with the loudest ideas myth. It just sort of annoyed me.
Totally. I think I was just more charmed by the designs and the bug gags. So I totally agree with what you're saying, but I gave it a 3 because I just liked it. I found the bug designs appealing. I like the variety of them and the jokes that they made that often hinted at some real bug biology.
Yeah. Urgency, I gave it a 3 out of 5, specifically because I just liked the way that it sort of picked up this thread of different riffs on Aesop's fable and sort of updated it for its time. So, in 2024, maybe not that urgent, but I feel like in 1998, it is kind of speaking to the cultural zeitgeist. But again, it's doing it in this way that I think is not as revolutionary or not as sort of progressive, I should say, as it thinks it is.
Yeah, I only gave it a 2 for this one because plot hinging on the need for collective action has urgency, but the rest of it is basically just for fun. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's not really speaking to the needs of our time in a way that feels that relevant these days.
Yeah.
But also, I wasn't really even thinking of all that when I was writing this, making my decisions. So maybe in light of your additional context, which I really appreciate, I might upgrade it to a 3. We'll see.
Okay. Greatness, I gave it a 4 out of 5. I really liked this movie. I thought it was really cute. It was funny. I really liked, like, the way that it was playing with these different tropes and different sort of narrative forms and stuff like that. The hero's journey that becomes a Seven Samurai thing, or vice versa. The ways that it's playing with the country and the city trope is really fun. And I don't know, I think I really like it. And I think that, like, Pixar movies and Disney movies can do this with a particular clarity when people are picking up those forms and playing with them in order to, I'm not going to go so far as make a statement, but at least have some fun with it.
Yeah, I gave it like a 3.5. I was into it. I liked the character designs. I thought the writing was very fun. The story and the acting were really entertaining. It's just a good bug story for kids, and I was one of those kids. I'm fond of it. But also, I have grown up quite a bit, so I can't give it all the points because...
Because it's not an adult movie?
No, just because I think for greatness sake, I would want there to be doing something really relevant with the story.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. And I guess it doesn't really land on that. Not that it needs to have a moral, but like what it's doing or what the takeaway from it is, I feel like could be a little bit stronger or a little bit cut a little deeper, maybe.
Yeah.
Sliminess, I gave it a 2. I don't think there was a ton of sliminess here. And that was fine because it's meant to be cute. The slimiest scene by far is the Iliad for Kids performance, where there's just blood everywhere. And I feel like some of the kind of like parts where they're in the city gets a little bit slimy, but this is Bugs as cute.
Yeah, I was catching on to the same things as you, and I also gave it a 2 out of 5. Yeah, just a little grody-ness here and there, but generally these are very nice, clean bugs. They are very shiny and pleasing in that Pixar way, and not going for sliminess. This movie gives you the idea that an ant colony is a really nice place to live. When it's not being oppressed.
When it's not being oppressed, crucially. Okay, so that gives it an average of 2.5 for me, and I think like 2.25 from you or something like that.
I did not do the math.
Okay, well, let's go with my math. But I was really happy that we did this one. It feels like an important one to do. I think it's the first one that a lot of people will think of for obvious reasons when they think of bug stories.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun talking about it with you.
Yeah.
So that's it for A Bug's Life. Stay tuned for next time when we're going back in time.
Going back in time to talk about Charlotte Perkins Gilman, specifically Herland and the story Be Wise.
Critterature was created by Philomena and me, Taylor Hart. I also edited it and made the theme music. Please rate and review the show wherever you subscribe. You can also find me on socials at Taylor Dr. Antbrains.